Ma'am, you know what happens? List of headings and reverse heading kinds of questions are very tricky. Whenever these kinds of questions come in front of us, we feel really very much depressed. We feel really very much stressed also. We get confused. We feel that IELTS reading is really very difficult. But you know what would be my answer? No and never. List of headings and reverse heading kinds of questions are also very easy, and rather IELTS reading is very easy if you follow all the techniques. Those I always share with you in my videos. Hello, this is Meera and very good afternoon to everybody. I know it's very late. I think approximately after 7 or 10 days I'm in front of you. Sorry, I was stuck somewhere and it was very much important to me. Anyhow, now today I'm going to guide you with IELTS reading reverse headings. What are reverse headings? Reverse headings means like which information is contained in which passage. And what I say, follow all the techniques, those I'm going to share with you. Then after saying me that ma'am, these questions are also very much easy in IELTS reading. See, don't waste your time for reading the questions first and then passage, then question, then passage. Many times what happen, 8 passages are there and only 3 questions are there. So students, they, you know what, they get confused. Ma'am, 8 passages and 3 questions, how could we get the answer? Very easy, follow all the techniques. See, there is no need to read the questions first. Directly go to the passage. Passage A, okay, read the first 2 or 3 sentences very carefully. Now increase your reading speed later on. Get the main idea or the topic sentence of the passage. Now go to the questions. Start reading. Question 1, mark the keywords. Question 2, mark the keywords. And question number 3, mark the keywords. Now, if you are feeling even 1% that any of the information in the passage A is matching to the information in any of the question, then write on the A option as answer to the question. Similarly, do other passages also. So after reading all the passages, you would come to know automatically that what the answer you wrote before for any of the question, that is the correct answer or not. I'm going to do it with you practically. You just see. But before that, I'm going to share the passage and the questions with you people. You do these questions with your own trick and then watch the video. And then say me that was the difference. 100% you will get the benefit. So let's go to the passage. Okay, as I said to you before, in list of headings and reverse headings, we never read questions because we don't want to waste our even a single second. Let's start from skimming and scanning of passages. Now, number 1, passage A. A sense of self develops in young children by degrees. The process can usually be thought of in terms of gradual emergence of 2. So, mark 2, somewhat that separate features. The self as a subject and the self as an object. William James introduced the distinction in 1892. The contemporaries of his search, Charles Cooley. Okay, wherever you people see the person's name like here, Charles Cooley and the William James, write it down by the side of the passage so that other questions you can save your time. William James and Charles Cooley added to the developing debate, and ever since then the psychology have continued building on the theory. Here in this passage, what did you learn? That there are 2 separate features. Those are developed continuously in children, young children. First is self as a subject and the second is self as an object. And then later on they just discussed that William Jones and then his contemporary Charles Cooley also, they added their developing debates, means that they were debating only. Now let's go to the questions. Now here I'm going to read the questions. I'm going to skim and scan the questions. Yeah. Firstly, I didn't do just to save my time. Now here, first, as we all know that this is reverse heading, just read the instructions and start reading and skimming and scanning the questions. First, you may use any letter more than once. A, B or C can be the answer of any 2 questions also or any 3 questions also. So this is very much necessary to read this. This is what? NB. Nota bene. Now let's start from 14 number question. An account of the method. So was there any reference of the method in this passage? No. An account of the method used by researchers in a particular study. See, researchers were doing study like Charles Cooley or James, but there was no reference of the method. The role of the imitation. Imitation means copy. So was there any reference of the imitation? No. Developing sense of identity. So imitation was not written. Now the age. Age mention was not at all in that passage A. Age in which children can usually identify and the static image of themselves. No, there was no mention of age. Now increase your speed. The reason for the limitations. Limitations means restrictions, hindrances, limitations of scientific research into self as a subject. Yeah, self as a subject was written, but limitations on self as a subject was not at all mentioned. The reference to the possible link between culture and particular form of behavior. No, there was no mention of behavior or the link between culture and behavior. Examples. So mark the word examples. A wide range of features that contribute to the sense of self as a object. No, there was no example that contribute to the sense of self as object. So any of the information in the questions I'm not getting in the A paragraph. So A paragraph is answer to none of the question. First two lines of any of the passage you read carefully and then you can increase the speed of your reading. The passage be according to James. So here again there is a reference of James. So write it down by the side of the passage to save your time for the other kinds of questions. A child's first step to the road of the self-understanding can be seen as a recognition of he or she exists. Okay, जब बच्चा पहली बार रोड पे आता है, when the child first time comes on the road, means comes outside of his home, then it recognizes that yeah, he or she really exists. This is an aspect of the self that labeled as self as a subject. So mark it and write down by the side of the passage self as a subject and gave the various elements and included the awareness of the, now I'm increasing the speed, agency, one of the power of act and the awareness to one's distinctiveness. Okay, child gets to know that the child is distinctive, it's different from the other people. When after coming outside of its home, these features gradually emerge, the influence explore the world, that comes to know about the world, interact with the other people, caregivers like parents and teachers. Coolly, write down the person's name Coolly here by the side of the passage, suggests as a sense of the self as a subject, just mark it, primarily concerned with being able to exercise power. So the child has to use the power and propose earlier examples. He proposed that the earliest examples of there are infants attempt to control the physical objects. Okay, children start to control the physical objects such as toys, his or her own limbs, and this is followed by attempts to affect the behavior of other people. See, behavior word is mentioned, but of other people. Other people, for example, infants learn when they cry and smile, someone responds to them. So this passage is saying what, when child first time comes out of its home, it starts to like realize that its existence is there in this world. It starts to control the physical objects like toys and other things, and it starts to recognize the behavior of the other people. Now let's go to the questions, starting from the first one. An account of the method used by researchers in the particular study. So there was no mention of any kind of method used by the researchers. The role of the imitation. So there was no mention of imitation also. Imitations means copy. Now the age at which the children, was there any mention of age? No. Identity, the static images of themselves. A reason for the limitations of the scientific research into the self as a subject. Yes, self as a subject was written, but there was no mention of any kind of reason, though those were saying about the limitations of the scientific research. Reference to the possible link between culture and the particular form of behavior. Yeah, behavior word was there. Of course it was there, but the behavior of other people means child with its activities start to impact the behavior of other people. But here there's a link between culture and particular form of behavior. So this question is not mentioning the behavior of other people or the impact of activities of child on the behavior of other people. So that's why, see, when I get the words in the question in the passage also, then I do translation. Otherwise, I never translate. There's no need to get afraid that, ma'am, we cannot do translation. Now, example of the wide range of features that contribute the sense of self as an object. No, there was no mention of self as an object. So till now, I have not found any kind of information from the questions in the passage A and B. Now let's go to passage C. Another powerful source of information for the infants about the effects they can have on the world around them is provided when others mimic them. So what do you mean by mimic? Mimic means copy. Just write down this word by the side of the passage after marking it. Many parents spend a lot of time, particularly in the early months, copying the infants. Okay, copying. Again, mimicry, copying, and the vocalization of the expressions in addition. Now, see, first two sentences, just read carefully and then increase your speed of reading. And if the children enjoy looking in the mirrors again, and where the moments they can also depend upon their own moments. And there's no children and infants recognize a reflection as their own image as a later development. However, Lewis and Brooke, so these are the person's name, just write on shortcut, Lewis and Brooke. And they suggest that the infants developing understanding of the moments on the scene in the mirrors. Okay, again the contingent and the zone, and leads to the growing awareness that they are distincting because they are the only they can change the reflection in the mirror. Now let's go to the questions. Now you know that after reading first 2 or 3 passages, my speed has been increased automatically. Now the understanding of questions is very deep to me, and automatically the key words are in my mind. Now there is no need to read all the questions. I know that there was a question related to like copy also. See, account of the method, no, imitation. See, 15 question is related to imitation or copy. Means information in the 15th question is in the passage C. Yeah, I can say, but you can check the other questions also. No, there was no mention of age. No, there was no mention of limitations also, self as a subject. And there was no mention of link between culture. See, now my speed has been increased. Example of the wide range that contribute in the sense of self as object. No, it was not mentioned in the paragraph C. Now let's go to passage D. Understanding that the children gain themselves as an active agent continues to develop in their attempts to cooperate with the others to play. Now the understanding of children is increasing when they start cooperating with the other people in play. And then end point. Okay, now there is mention of the person name. Now write down over here by the side of the passage. Then points out that in such a way day-to-day relationship and interactions that children understanding of the his or herself emerges. Empirical investigations are going on of the self as a subject in children. So write down self as a subject. So some investigations are going on. However, rather scarce. See, whenever I get any kind of location, then I translate. Otherwise, I never translate. Because of the difficulties of communications. Means there are some difficulties of communication. Some negative information is there. Even if young infants can reflect on their experience, they certainly cannot express this aspect of self directly. So there are some limitations, and then some investigations are going on in this passage. And children, they have started developing their relationship with the other people. They have started to cooperate with other people. They have started to interact with other people, but still they are facing some kind of difficulties. Now let's go to the questions. An account of the method used by researchers in a particular study. Yeah, of course the study was going on, investigation was going on, but there was no mention of any kind of method. But if you feel even one person, just write it down by the side of the question that yeah, ma'am, D can be the answer. No problem, just write it down. Now the role of the imitation, no, this was not, the age mention was not there, and the limitations of the scientific research into the self as a subject. Yeah, there was mention of self as a subject also, and there was mention of limitations also, yeah, negative, that the scientists were investigating and were facing some kinds of difficulties for expressing themselves. Yeah, limitations were there for the scientific research as a self as a subject. I'm feeling this. If you feel, you can also write it down, no problem. Reference to the possible link between culture and particular behavior, no, it was not mentioned. And the example of the wide range of features that contribute as a self as an object, no, it was not mentioned. Now let's go to next passage. Once children acquire certain level of awareness to begin to place themselves in the whole series of the categories and the play and the search as important part of defining them uniquely as themselves. Now they have started to define themselves. The second step is to, now they have acquired now the second step is to development of the full sense of self is what? James. Now again the mention of James is there for the other questions to save you time. Called the self as a object. Now here self as a object information has been started. This has been seen by many to be the aspect of the self and with the most influenced by social elements. There is some kind of influence by social elements on that since it is made up of the social roles. Okay, social roles are there. Some such as student, brother. So these are the examples of the social roles who influence the children. Self as an object sense and the characteristics which deserve the meaning and from the comparison interaction between the other people. So they are interacting with other people, such as trustworthiness, shyness and sporting ability. So we have started to compare. So there is influence of other social roles on children sense as an object. So this passage is saying about how the social roles and how the social characters influence the children's sense as an object. Now let's go to the questions. Okay, the questions are an account of the method used by researchers in particular study. No, there is no mention of method. Now the keywords of the questions are totally in your mind. Now you can increase your speed. The role of the imitation. No, there is no mention of imitation. The age at which the children should identify the noun. The reason for the limitations. No, there is no limitation. Also reference to a possible link between culture and the particular behavior. No. Examples of the wide range of features that contribute to the sense as an object. Yes, of course, self as an object was also mentioned and the examples were also mentioned. Brothers, trustworthiness, shyness, means these kinds of examples were given such as. So I can say that without any doubt, I can give the answer to this question is E. So without any doubt, just write it down. If you have confusion also, then also write it down instead of leaving it unattempted. Now let's go to the next passage. Cooley and the other researchers suggested that the connection between. Now here's the connection. So there was the mention of link something. Okay, connection between person's own understanding. No, this is the connection between person's own understanding of the identity and the other people understanding. That Cooley believed. Okay, write down Cooley over here. And the build up, there's a sense of identity and the reactions of the other people. Okay, to them and from the view they believe that the others of them, and they called of the self as object. Again here, looking glass as in a sense the people see themselves as they are reflected to the others in the mid. Okay, it's the next sentence. If there's a next mention, there's the mention of other name, and the went even further in this song, the self and the social world inextricably bound together. Okay, that self means children. They feel that the self and the social world, they are connected to each other, and the self essentially social structure, and it arises from the social experience. It's impossible to conceive of the self arising outside of the social experience. See, many people, they get confused. Okay, this passage is saying about the connection between person's own understanding and the understanding of other people. Means there is some kind of relationship that is explained in this passage. So social structure arises from the self experience. Means this kind of information is there. Okay, now let's go to the question. Now I can go very fast. An account of the method. No, there is no mention of method in a particular study. No, the role of the imitation. No, the age. No, there was no mention of age. The reason for the limitations of the scientific research itself as a subject. I don't think so. There was any kind of mention of the limitations. Reference to the possible link between culture and the particular behavior. Yeah, there was link. There was connection. See, the connection was what? Connection was between person's own understanding and the understanding of other people. There was no mention of the connection between culture and the particular behavior. So here we need to do translation. So F is not the answer of 18 also. See, I need to check all the questions again and again after reading each and every passage, because I'm not sure that whether the answers I have written are correct or not. Now 19 number examples of the wide range of the features that contribute the sense of self as an object. No, it was not at all mentioned. So F is not the answer of any of the questions. The next passage is Lewis and the Broken. Okay, they had the mention of people, Lewis and Broken. Just write it down by the side of the passage, as I said to you before, just to save the time of other questions. Okay, the important development milestone is reached when children become able to recognize themselves visually. Now children have started to recognize themselves without the support of seeing contingent moments. The recognition occurs around the second birthday. So here's the mention of second birthday. just write down second birth date in your own language that you can recognize it. So I have written in one experiment. Now the experiment is going on. Lewis and the Brooke did some of the red powder. So now they are doing experimentation. They did the red powder on the nose of the children and they're playing on in front of them. Now this is the experiment that they have. Rather than the touch to the nose, the psychologists reasoned that if the children knew that what they usually look like, this is only the experiment, surprised by the unusual in the mark of the start looking at it, and they found that the children 15 to 18 months. So here the age is mentioned are generally not able to recognize themselves unless other cues such as movement that are present. So at what age children start to recognize themselves? This is mentioned in this passage. Now let's go to the question. Now actually the questions are on my text. The account of the methods used by researchers in a particular study. Yeah, the study is going on. They dab some powder on the nose of the children whether they recognize themselves or not. So this is the experiment and the method also, that the powder was tapped on the nose of the children. So now what I say that D is not the answer. As per my opinion, G is the answer. Because they dab the powder on the nose of. This is the method that they use for the particular study. Now the role of the imitation not mentioned. The age at which the children usually identify a static image of themselves. Yeah, here that age was also mentioned. Remember, see here, children from 15 to 18 months, they generally recognize themselves, and on their second birthday, so age is also mentioned in this paragraph, they start to identify themselves. So here question number 16, G can be the option. Next, limitations. No, there was no mention of limitations or self as a subject. Reference to the link between culture and particular form of behavior. No, there was no mention of behavior. Connection between culture and behavior. Examples of the wide range of features that contribute to sense as an object. No, there was no mention of self as a object. So this is also not the answer. So 14 and 16 question information is in passage G. Now let's go to the next passage. Now the next passage is finally perhaps the most graphic expressions of the self-awareness in general can be seen in the display of the rage, which are most common from 18 months to 3 years age. So here also the mention of age is there. So I will write it down, 18 months to 3 years age. In longitudinal study group of the 3 to 4 children, Bunsen in the 1975 found the intensity of the frustration. So anger, frustration and anger between the age of this one. Here the age mentioned, but they at this age children get angry or not. What means this kind of behavior? Means this kind of behavior, this information is showing other the children disagreements involved. So here also the disagreement, the toy and none of them had played. Now little improve your speed, although it may be marked as a society. And the link between sense of smell and ownership also features a child. So this passage is saying about that at particular age children behavior gets changed. They start to show their frustration or anger. They show their disagreements that involves a struggle over the toy. Means what kind of behavior children do at the particular age. Now let's go to the questions. The first question is account of the method used by the researchers in a particular. So there was no mention of any kind of method used by researchers. So 14 F cannot be the answer. The role of the imitation, no mention of imitation. The age, yeah, age mention was there, at which the children can usually identify the static image of themselves. Yeah, at this age children start to identify their static image, not the frustration or the anger. They show the different kind of behavior. So 16 question will go with the G option only. The reason for the limitations of the no, there was no mention of limitations. Reference to the possible link between culture and the particular form of behavior. Yeah, behavior they were doing, right? See, behavior mention was there, frustration, anger. But where's the mention of culture? Let's go to the passage again. Here, see, the children seem to be disputing ownership rather than wanting to play with it, and they may less marked with the other societies. And the link between the sense of self and ownership is a notable feature of childhood in the Western societies. So mention of Western culture also. So that's why we can say there's reference to the possible link between culture. Link between Western society's culture and a particular form of behavior. I can give answer to this question H. So answers are G, C, G, D, H, E. So understand in this manner we can do reverse headings also. So follow all the tips and techniques those I shared with you if you wanna achieve all the correct answers in these kinds of questions. Okay, till the time, bye bye, take care and best of luck. Any query you can ask me in the comment box.